Too often we get caught up in the present moment. Will Rafa catch Roger? Can Serena match Margaret Court? Our newsfeed is constantly scrolling to the next eye-popping moment. The coronavirus recently turned the tennis world on its head, forcing officials to postpone or flat out cancel major events, leaving tennis players unemployed in limbo. The last time something remotely reflective of this scale happened during World War II. Revisiting the late 30s and 40s, you'll find one player who was deeply impacted by the war. You'll also see she had a deep impact on the game and the war effort as well. Her name was Alice Marble. Born in 1913, Alice grew up in the Bay Area of Northern California. Her passion early on was baseball.
She was a tomboy, and her brother finally said, Alice, you can't keep playing baseball. You know, you gotta start acting like a girl. And he handed her a tennis racket.
Alice quickly picked up the sport, often playing late into the day with her friends at nearby courts. Sadly, this also led to one of the early tragedies in her life.
She was raped when she was 15, walking home from the park where she played tennis. And that scarred her for a long time. I mean, it really, it had a traumatic effect on her, as it would, at 15.
Alice continued to play tennis and used it as a saving grace. She played aggressive, or as they said back then, she played like a man.
In the old days, it's, oh, you play like a man, which is so irritating. Yes, we're aggressive players. We serve and volley, yes. And of course, she was the first one to really serve and volley and be so successful.
Her talent drew the attention of Eleanor Tennant, or Teach, as she was called, one of the premier tennis coaches of the time.
Teach instilled all of the discipline that Alice didn't have. Alice was a free spirit, had a temper, threw rackets. Teach was very controlling, and Alice was only to focus on tennis. Tennis is what you're meant to be, and you're going to be the best.
I always say without Teach, I never would have made it, because she was the push. She was a very good driving coach.
Under Teach's tutelage, Alice quickly became a top junior. However, on her first trip overseas, she overexerted herself and collapsed on court.
Playing in Paris in defiance of doctor's orders, Miss Alice Marble collapsed in a faint during her match with France.
Upon return to the States, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and doctors said her career was over.
I mean, here's a champion tennis player who can't walk around the block without sitting down and resting. Teach Tennant came to the rescue and took her home and started with exercise. Alice was not a quitter. She was never going to stop. So with Teach's help, she came back from that, and she went to the top of her game.
With a new passion for the game, Alice began dominating women's tennis, winning her first major at the U.S. Nationals in 1936 over Helen Jacobs.
Marble, the surprise of the tournament, looks strong coming back from her illness. She knows she's got a shot at a stunning upset here, and she's playing aggressive tennis. That's a winner. Serving from the far court now. Marble has the champ on the run. She is relentless. The underdog Marble going for broke. Jacobs hits long. It's over. Alice Marble is the new national champion.
Not only had I won the championship, but I'd gotten my health back, which was much more important than anything else in the world. And when the umpire said Alice Marble, champion of the United States, I looked around to see who Alice Marble was. I was so amazed that I could do that.
She'd win the U.S. again in 1938. However, her real goal was Wimbledon.
Her first trip to Wimbledon, Teach told all the media that Alice was a slam dunk, that she was going to win.
Miss Marble, are you sailing for the coronation or for Wimbledon?
I'm sailing for Wimbledon. This is my first attempt at Wimbledon, and I hope to bring back something for America.
And Alice didn't win her singles. So when she went back in 1939, she was ready.
She said, if you want to succeed in life, you're going to have to fight for everything you get.
In one of her matches, she tore a stomach muscle, and the doctor said, you shouldn't even try to play. And she said, I'm going to play. So he taped her up, and she played, and she won her singles, doubles, and mixed doubles. And that was the defining moment in her life because she was the world champion and had come back from the kind of downturns that would have stopped so many people in their tracks.
Alice became a national celebrity, becoming close friends with Clark Gable and Carole Lombard. She often frequented the Williamhurst Castle to join in lavish parties.
The ticker tape parades, all these offers of screenplays and singing engagements.
She was a very glamorous person, talented, almost like a movie star.
It should be played easily, very much like you play that accordion. I was afraid his playing bothered you. I don't mind a little music when I play. It relaxes me, and that's half the battle. Comes a forehand, you can take it in your stride. Comes the backhand, well, it's just the other side. Comes love, comes love.
She was 26 years old, and that's when Alice realized that she needed to take control of her life.
Although Alice was achieving major success on and off the court, her life was dominated by her coach, Teach. This often led to Alice seeking companionship and comfort outside the lines.
She was such an innocent, so she was pretty easily seduced. She met the handsome Swiss banker, fell madly in love with him, and Teach said, it's either this guy or tennis. And she chose tennis. Then she was fascinated by Tika Madrigal, who was a very well-known language instructor. And Tika moved on to somebody else, and Alice was really hurt. But what it left her with was a real compassion for homosexuals. So Alice was quick to love and never forgot the people who really mattered to her.
As the U.S. joined World War II following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the tennis world came to a standstill. Fortunately, Alice had met her soulmate, Joe Crawley, a fighter pilot. They married, and Alice became pregnant shortly after. But then Joe was sent off to battle.
She was expecting him home. She had had a miscarriage in an automobile accident. That was devastating. She hadn't told Joe. She thought, well, we have a whole life together, we'll make other babies. She was expecting him home at Christmas, and instead, a telegram arrived saying that he had been killed. So she tried to commit suicide, and Teach and Mary Kay Brown, who was a former U.S. Open champion, they saved her, and they talked her into living again. But she was devastated. He was the love of her life, and no man ever really mattered after that.
Alice herself made multiple attempts to enlist in the armed forces, but she was always turned down due to her history with tuberculosis. That is, until Army intelligence looking to recruit spies knocked on her door.
So many of the spies of that time were, celebrities who, could travel around without suspicion, Julia Childs and Cary Grant. So when the United States started needing spies, Alice was kind of a natural because she had shown an interest in contributing to the war effort. Alice was taught to shoot a gun, self-defense, and how to pick a safe because they had a specific mission in mind for her.
Her mission was to travel to Switzerland to play exhibitions on army bases with the hopes of making contact with her former lover, the Swiss banker, who was believed to be tracking finances for the Nazis.
And they rekindled the romance, which made it even harder because he offered her a wonderful life. But Alice was a patriot. She made the decision to do what she had been sent there to do. In the basement of the chateau was a wine cellar that led to a safe, and this was where the records were kept of money and treasures for the Germans. So one night, Alice said that she was sick and couldn't go to a party that Hans absolutely had to attend. She went downstairs, got into the safe, and photographed the records. She was discovered, and she panicked and ran out and jumped into his car, started driving down a mountain road back to Geneva. She sees car lights behind her, and they get closer and closer. car pulls up alongside her, and she looks over, and it's the man who first made contact with her in the U.S., asking her to be a spy. So she said, "Ugh, I'm safe." Pulls over to the side of the road. This guy said, "Give me the camera." And she said, "Well, that's not the plan. I'm supposed to take it to Geneva and turn it over there." He says, "Give me the camera." And the guy who's driving the car says, "Just kill her and let's get out of here." So Alice realizes she has no way to defend herself, and this guy is pulling out a gun, is going to shoot her. So she runs. And she gets shot in the back.
Alice woke up in a hospital bed, lucky to be alive, but empty-handed. Her contact turned out to be a double agent, and it exposed the film. Unbeknownst to him, however, Alice possessed a photographic memory, and she was able to pass along vital intelligence to Army officials. Alice would go 40 years without detailing any of the events of her mission until she released her autobiography, Courting Danger. Many believe the events didn't happen based on lack of evidence. However, there was some closely tied to the war effort that verified her involvement.
I had a conversation with Mary Bancroft, who was the mistress of Allen Dulles, one of the founding members of the OSS, which became the CIA. And she said, "Oh, we knew why Alice was here." And I said, "Do you know who this character was, this Hans character?" And she said, "Through a process of elimination, I think I know, but I'm not going to tell you."
Following the war, Alice used her celebrity and prominent position in the sport to fight for injustice as well. In 1950, when the United States Lawn Tennis Association refused to let Althea Gibson, an African-American, play at Forest Hills because of the color of her skin, Alice wrote an open letter calling for desegregation and fairness in the sport.
Alice Marble was a real champion of fairness and equality and inclusion.
Miss Marble helped to break down a racial barrier to give me and others like me a fair chance in tennis.
What was it Miss Marble said to you to cheer you up, Althea?
Well, she came up to me on the courts and said, "Have courage. Remember, you're just like all the rest of us." Yeah.
Thank you very much. Althea Gibson.
Alice would have several careers following her playing days, but her passion always remained with the game.
She coached a lot of the young stars of that time. She coached Billie Jean.
The first thing she ever taught me in tennis, she took me to the cross right in the middle of the court, just stood right on the tee, and she said, "See this area? This is where most matches are won or lost." I never forgot it.
She coached Sally Ride, who could have been a professional tennis player, but Sally decided to be an astronaut instead.
Alice was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 1964. She would pass away in 1990. In San Francisco, near where she grew up, several courts were named in her honor, overlooking the Pacific Ocean.
I think Alice was an inspiration. She tried to set an example for other tennis players, other women. I mean, she would decide she wanted to do something and just did it.
People say, how do tennis players get to be tennis players? They just kind of progress. You know, you never had this in mind, and all of a sudden you won a little, and then you want to win a little bit more, and so it happened. I had to be a champion. It was all there. I just had to work on it and believe that I could.